Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now what I've got whizzing around in front of me today is a soldier of the Special Naval Landing Forces from the Japanese Empire during World War II. And they make for a really interesting counterpoint to a lot of the Imperial Japanese Army stuff that you see on the table, because the Army and Navy, they did not cooperate, they did not get along. So the very distinctive equipment that this fellow's carrying makes for a fun little painting project. So the painting for this is going to be quite simple, and then I am going to take it a little further. All of the paints for this will be listed in the description, the same as always, so let's get started.
So once you've got your miniatures assembled, and make sure that you are popping the correct equipment on your landing force guys, first thing to do then is to prime him. Now here what I've used is US Olive Drab from Vallejo, which might seem a bit of a strange choice. There is also the Russian uniform spray, and the difference there is that Russian uniform is fractionally darker, and it is a slightly more neutral grey-green. Now with the US Olive Drab, olive is the clue. It's got a slightly yellowish tint to it, which is going to work better for the tropical uniforms. At least I think so. Remember, this is all up in the air. Your eyes will probably differ to mine, so if you want to change it up, Russian uniform is an option as well. If you want a lighter, much more faded finish, then you might even try Army Painter's Army Green as the primer. That's going to be much lighter, but for faded combat uniforms, might do the job. So the first thing we're going to do is spin them around here. What I've got is an old makeup brush. That's worth picking up a set of these from Amazon or something, and I have on it some Khaki. Now I have made sure there is next to nothing left here. You'll see going over the edge of the base a few times, I have to work to build up that color. What I am going to do is just very lightly dry brush the uniform, because when you're painting something that doesn't have camouflage or anything like that, you can come back and highlight it. You know, you can spend a bit of time with a lighter color and highlight the uniform and it will look really cool. But if you're looking to mash these guys out relatively quickly and still have them look interesting on the table, texture is where you want to look to. And a nice quick dry brush with a slightly lighter color is a really easy way to get that on the uniforms. So Khaki is a great one for a bunch of green stuff, and it does have a little bit of yellow in it as well, so it's great for our, let's say, slightly faded combat operations looking uniform. You can add as much of this as you like. If you are using a makeup brush, you'll find that it tends to quite naturally catch the edges and smoothly apply over the flatter areas, like trousers and what have you. But anywhere that you need to, if you find you've applied too much, you just don't like the finish, you can come back with a little bit of US Olive Drab from the pot and get rid of it. Now, like I said, if you do put a little too much of that on, you can take it off with the base color again, but I don't think you're going to need to. That slightly battered, faded look is going to suit us just fine. So now we're going to move on to his skin, and here I'm going to use flat flesh. Now this is a funny old one because it looks really, really light and almost a little bit orange when it's on the palette. Once you apply it, it will dull down a bit, and it looks, for want of a better word, a little more like flesh. Looks god-awful going on though, so I'm aware of that as well. I'm not steering you wrong, I promise. It will definitely need a second coat after the first one, so take your time. Don't forget things like ears, the back of his head and what have you, and his hands. Now I swear we're not going to leave it like that. What I am going to do here, I have Woodland Camo from the Army Painter, popping a little bit of water into the edge there, and I'm going to apply this over his leg wraps. Now, I'm doing this because I want to change up the color, make them a little bit more vibrant green, and just show, this is another color that you could use for the uniform itself, to be quite honest. While there are ties and laces essentially around these wraps, I'm just going to go straight over the whole thing with the green first. Now for any leather equipment, flat brown is a really useful one to have. This one's from Vallejo and it covers like nobody's business. So great to just pop on one go. If you do need to, you can apply a second coat, but you'll often find you don't need to. Now the gas mask hose. This is a fun one. This is where we're getting fussy. What I have here is olive drab from the army painter. Any army man green will do here. This is the later type hose, which is listed as being an olive drab. This is quite light going on, but when we shade it, it's going to look a bit more reasonable. Now, let's spin him around, and for his rifle, what I'm going to use is beige brown. So this one you could also use for the bayonet case, which is hanging from his hip. Generally speaking, the longer the war went on, the more sort of natural materials you'd see on these poor guys. All the same, I'm going to paint it black a little bit later. But just something to bear in mind, a wee splash of brown wouldn't be inaccurate. Now for his canvas gear and straps, webbing, stuff like that, what I have is skeleton bone. You can use here German camo beige, even deck tan. A neutral sort of color is going to work better, I would suggest. And this will cover pretty well. I'm still going to come back and give it a second coat once I'm done. Now on his leg wraps there, you'll see I have painted in the ties, the actual straps. I would suggest though, they're a detail that you can very easily skip. Now what I'm going to turn to next is green-grey from Vallejo, and there are two colors called green-grey. If you can't spot that this is the much, much lighter of the two, I can't help you. You could also use this as your actual canvas color, to be perfectly honest, but I'm going to use it as the color of his shirt. Okay, now what I'm going to turn to is German grey, and I'm going to paint this anywhere that would be black. Now I've spoken about this a few times on the channel. The idea is that German grey is very, very dark grey, almost black, and once it dries and we go ahead and pop a shade over the top of it, what happens is it's a little bit more lively than just a flat, complete black would be. There's nothing stopping you from using black, I just think it looks a little bit cartoony, but hey, it's up to you. I always think that's where we start seeing these miniatures come together. Now there are a few parts which are quite predominantly metal, so what I'm going to use is plate mail metal. So for his bayonet, which would have been pretty fearsome, a quick coat of that, as well as the little gas mask canister. There are parts of this which are silver, and the stopper on his water bottle was aluminium, so we'll pop that in there now. Now for the little straps holding the gas canister in place, what I'm going to use is paratrooper tan, but here any middling beige brown sort of thing will do the job. Now the last color to apply on these fellas is going to be the helmet, and there's a bit to think about here. If you want to stick to greens, then you could use, again, Russian uniform, US olive drab, but what I've found is that most of the surviving examples, and indeed color plates and what have you from Osprey, recommend that this was a greenish brown, and the surviving examples look quite similar to the Imperial Japanese Army versions. So I'm going to use green-brown from Vallejo and use the same as I did on the army troops, because I think that is pretty close to the greenish brown that's described in the books that I've got. Now, once you finish with your last base coats, cruise around and just tidy up any little bits of mess that you might have made. This fella's ready to go. Because I have got something in mind later on for his base, I've hit it with a couple of coats of green-brown. You probably won't need to unless you're going to do exactly what I am doing. The shade we're going to use is a mix. This is Marine Juice, and I have done a couple of videos on this in the past. The premise is, this version is a bottle each of Dark Tone from the Army Painter, Reichland Flesh Shade, and Lamian Medium from Citadel. The premise here is that it is warm, like it should be, just instead of black, it's a warm brownish, sort of reddish brown. It's quite good like that, and it will go over anything. So as you can see, we're getting loads of shading straight away. And because we have added a decent chunk of medium to it, it doesn't really stain anywhere that we're applying it. Helps if I get it in shot though. If you do find that it settles anywhere and you get a great big clump of it though, make sure you are shifting it around, same as you would any shade. So once I've got this on everything, I'm
going to let them dry for about half an hour, and we will see then what we've got.
So once that has dried, we have, well, most of the work done. You can pop them on the table like this quite happily, although I do think that skin tone's maybe a little bit flat. No pun intended, we did use flat flesh, but we can liven that up a little. As well, I want to do 1 or 2 additional highlights just to make, give it a little bit more pizzazz. But for army painting, we're pretty much sorted. However, let's keep going. So starting with his skin, what I've done is to mix in half and half warm skin shade and speed paint medium. Now, this is not particularly strong, and I don't really want it to be. I just want a little bit more warmth in his skin tone. So warm skin shade feels like it would be an obvious choice, doesn't it? You don't need to apply very much of this, and it will dry a little bit more intensely than it looks going on, so don't just bucket a huge amount on straight away. You can also tweak your thinning of this if you want. Try it neat on a couple of figures if you want to. Just a wee bit at a time and see how you like the look. Now while that is drying, I've got a little bit of green-brown again, because I want to brighten up the helmet just a touch. So I've thinned this down a little bit more than I usually would, and I'm just going to ping around the sort of top half of the dome. Now while that's still drying, what I'll take is a little bit of khaki, and I've thinned this down maybe a little bit more than I normally would, but not so much that it's just going to run off the brush and I'll lose control. So just a tiny wee bit of it on my brush there. And I'm going to use this to pick out just 1 or 2 sharper edges on the clothing. Because we've already used this as our dry brush color, it's going to take very well as a quick highlight. So you'll probably find you don't need to add very much of this. Right, now that the both marine juice and that skin wash have dried, what we're going to do is go back to the flat flesh that we base coated the guy with, and paint in just a few bits on the backs of his knuckles, places like his nose, his cheeks, and this fella's chin's going to be a little bit difficult to reach because of his chin strap there, so we'll just leave that. Now if you want to take that any further, grab yourself just a tiny bit of Dorado skin. Now this one's from the Army Painter, and it's a little bit lighter than Flayed One Flesh from Citadel, if that's a good comparison. What I'll do is just a little bit of this right on the tip of his nose, corner of his cheeks, and I'll also not forget that he's got ears. I always forget ears. Now I'm going to spin him around, and for the white parts, the canvas parts rather, what I have is ancient stone. Now you might even want to go lighter with this. Something like, I think it's Bony Spikes is the next one up from the Army Painter range. But anything, this is kind of a light ivory color, and it will work well for what we've done. And that is pretty much that. What I'm going to do now is take him outside and hit him with a matte varnish spray before the next step. And then once that has had some time to dry, we've got a nice smooth varnish. I'm going to go ahead and base him. And then I've laid down a wee bit of printer paper just to catch what is going to be a mess. Applying a fairly thick coating of PVA with just a little bit of water in it. And then I'm going to take, this is Soil of Sparta from Kraut Cover. Let's give that a wiggle and just dump that rather heavily over the base. Give that a wee shake. Now folks have suggested it's easier to dip them into the base. I have found it easier with these things to pour it out. I get better results that way. This is at a couple of seconds to collect. I'll just tap it off and pop this back into the container. Then I'm going to paint the base rim with a little bit of desert yellow. Might need a couple of coats here. Then we'll get them up on the spinny thing and get some photos. Call them done.
And so, there at last, our Special Naval Landing Force trooper is complete. Now, I really enjoyed the research for this fella. It was quite interesting seeing the big difference between how these guys were kind of expected to fight, what they were expected to do, versus the likes of the United States Marine Corps. They were very, very different, and it was fascinating to see that, landing force, you kind of put 2 and 2 together and just think to yourself, oh yeah, they're Japanese Marines. No, There's a whole lot more to their story than that, so definitely worth going and checking out. Very interesting stuff. So as always, thanks goes out to Exit 23 Games for the light and sound equipment, as well as all of my wonderful patrons who are keeping me ticking in paints and glue, which includes my gorgeous producers who are showing up on screen now. Now, any questions or anything, feel free to drop them in the old comment box below. My Blue Sky and Instagram are both linked down there too. So thank you one and all for your time, and you all enjoy the rest of your day.